into our Cubs Recap Podcast, a presentation of our Recap YouTube channel. Hope you'll follow us there. Available audio only everywhere you get your favorite podcast. With my partner, my guy, he is Gordon Wittenmeyer at the MLB Winter Meetings in Nashville, Tennessee at the Opryland Hotel. I'm David Kaplan. All right, Gordon, let's get right into this because we had Jed Hoyer getting into it in the lobby briefly with Bob Nightingale. Bob saying that the Cubs.
I want to address that because
we'll get into that in 1 second. Bob Nightingale writing that the Cubs appear to be out on Otani and they were not willing to go to the financial levels that it appears it will take to sign him. And so my initial take was, hold on a second. Now, you knew anybody with a freaking blog, anybody with a cell phone, anybody listening to our podcast knows it's probably going to be $500 million or more. It's probably going to be 9 to 12 years or more. We saw Bryce Harper get 13 a few years ago. So,
and by the way, Bryce Harper's talking to the Phillies about an extension.
Correct. So to go down the road on Otani, knowing what it's going to cost, and then say, yeah, we're not willing to spend that much money. But then Jed Hoyer pushed back. Jesse Rogers on Waddle and Sylvia. I witnessed it. It was brief. And Jesse was on with me and Hoodie this morning.
That's what I want to.
But he did make some pointed remarks. So you're down there. Tell us what happened.
Well, my understanding is that this was characterized mistakenly by Jesse. Jesse and Bob are good friends and have been for a long time. My understanding of what happened is Bob explained it later, didn't know Jesse was going to go on the air with this. That's not what Jed was upset about. Jed wasn't upset about the Otani report. Jed was upset about a different rumor, source speculation, whatever that Bob had reported and pushed back on it. So he was trying to let him know that whatever the other item was, it wasn't happening. And so in the back and forth on that you know Jed well enough to know that he knows that we have a job to do, and whether Otani wants things to be leak-proof or not, if the reporter finds something out and reports it, that's completely separate. And Jed knows that we're not complicit in keeping it leak-proof. We want to know what's going on. We want to be able to tell the fans what's going on. So Jed's not going to jump somebody for having something, especially if it might be true. So I don't know, and I don't know what level of truth there was to that, but I have talked to some Cubs people who early on in the meetings this week were afraid of the Blue Jays in this process and really thinking that the Blue Jays might beat them to Otani.
So do you believe, as you and I tape this at 3:42 Wednesday afternoon, the meetings are now concluding, you're going to come back to Chicago. Do you believe the Cubs are still involved or completely out?
I suspect they're not completely out, only because I do think Otani's pretty close. I do think that the latest that we're indications are suggesting he might even make a decision by the end of the weekend. So he's got all his intel at this point. My guess is the Cubs don't get him. My guess is they're still at least the periphery of this, but I would say the Dodgers are at the closer to the center of this, and so are the Blue Jays. And if you wanted an indication, Dave Roberts yesterday on the record was asked about Otani, and he said, we had a meeting with him in LA a few days ago. Now that's supposed to be a banned statement. You're not supposed to say anything. He said it. He not only said it, but he said it publicly. That's not just a leak. That's basically a stand up in front of the podium statement type thing. And he answered a bunch of follow-ups on that. And later somebody said, well, why would you say that publicly when everything we've heard is that they're going to eliminate teams that leak anything? And he said, look, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. You asked me a question. This is media availability, formalized media availability. You asked me a question. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. And in fact, I asked counsel yesterday, did you meet with Otani?
He said, yeah, we all heard your voice, and everyone went, that's Gordon.
Yeah. I did not meet with Otani, he said. I said, well, what about the front office? He says, I did not meet with Otani. So he also apparently is not lying. But my point being that I don't think Dave Roberts is a fool. They're either very close or they've gotten indications that they're out on him, and I don't think they're out on him. So I do think that the Blue Jays are serious players for this, and the Giants have always been kind of around the periphery. We're going to see in the next couple of days. There is still enough sort of top secrecy surrounding this that it's really hard to have a firm handle on it at this point. But you've got all the indicators right there that you can kind of maybe put a couple of breadcrumbs in a line or maybe connect some dots.
So I was also told Otani is as regimented about his routine as any athlete anyone's ever seen come through Major League Baseball, and that he sleeps 14 hours a day. He has a way that he does his prep for every game, and it may not align with what other teams like to do. And so that going back to the Angels is not that far-fetched. Do you agree?
I agree with that. I think that assuming that the Angels are in for as much as the other teams are, I absolutely think that would be in play, in part for the very reasons that you suggested. But I'll take it a step further, right? A couple of years ago, I went into that clubhouse to get Mike Trout, found Mike Trout, talked to him a little bit. And then this is when you and I worked together, NBC Sports Chicago.
Yeah.
And I think we maybe even mentioned this on the last podcast. But not Suzuki. Otani was there. I wanted to ask him about Suzuki. He was just there. I wasn't looking for him or anything, but he happened to be there and he wasn't doing anything. It was in our limited media availability time in the clubhouse. So I asked him if he would talk, and he ignored my very presence and continued to stare at the wall. I asked his interpreter, hey, can he talk? And Jesse was there too. And so we both wanted to get him. Same subject, just like a minute and a half. Just give us your impression of Suzuki and anything you know about him from Japan. He wouldn't do it. And I thought, well, why not? I'm thinking, this blew my mind that he was in the clubhouse during this time, not doing anything else. And I had no idea there was a policy. So turns out, and media relations people came over and said, this is his policy. He doesn't talk except after the games that he starts. So that right there, you put that into play. You put the strict sort of regimen that's maybe outside of what team activities are. Some of that stuff is on his own time. That's cool. And you do make some concessions for a player of his caliber. But you start adding these things up incrementally, and they start to look kind of like a handful to deal with. It's definitely outside the norm. And as we know in baseball, much more so than, say, football, which plays once a week and has very compartmentalized access from the outside world. Baseball's a grind every single day. It's hard enough to get a group of 26 players and the coaching staff and everybody else everywhere they need to be and on the same page. And then when you start having enough of these other things add up, that can be a bit of a handful.
Okay, so away from Otani, because, fans are upset. The Cubs are being cheap. I still think if he was truly interested in all that went into being a Cub, they'd find a way to make the money work. But, someone who I trust in the game said to me, Cap, listen to me. You love going to Wrigley and having 4,000 people standing on Waveland and Sheffield and waiting for home run balls, and you think all that's cool. He doesn't. He wants to get into the clubhouse in the cloak of secrecy, go through his unique routine, and does not want to deal with all you media people and having 200 media at every Cubs game. That is not something that he's looking forward to, A. And B, well, Marquis would like to fly over to Japan and, go through your routine. And Marquis would like to have this with you. He's not going to do any of that stuff. He does not want it.
He won't tell anybody the name of his friggin' dog. I mean, this is where we're at, and that's fine. That's who he is. God bless you. Make all the money you can. Play terrific baseball. That's fine. But teams have to make their calculations on this too. You're
Correct.
asking for the most top dollar in the history of the game. In addition to, you're going to be kind of a tough dude to deal with every single day for a 6-month season, not to mention the longest training camp in all of sports, which is its own challenge media-wise early on for the high-profile teams that have done high-profile things in the offseason. You imagine what Sloan Park's going to look like first few days of spring training. And so if he were to go there. So these are all things that come into play. In fact, go back to Dave Roberts, right? And now one of the reasons I think that the Dodgers appealed to him so much is because of kind of what you alluded to. That's familiar territory. That's the same media market. That's the same locale, essentially. I mean, it's 30 miles away, 40 miles away, whatever it is. Where he might be able to keep his same home. I'm not sure where he lives out there during the season, but there's such a familiarity there that was part of what made the Dodgers a favorite in addition to their resources all along. I asked Dave Roberts about this, though. I asked him about that access thing. His policy is he doesn't talk except after he pitches. He's not going to pitch at all next season. I asked him in your meeting, did that come up? And is that a concern, especially when it is the same media market, but it's the higher profile team?
Yep.
Like, so does that come into play when you're talking to him? Do you have different expectations? And he gave an answer about how, he's kind of his own man. And, but that is an issue. Whether it's a concern, it is an issue. And he said, I hope we get the chance to have that conversation with him. So it'll at least be a conversation. And I can tell you this from knowing the different markets, anybody that thinks Chicago's a tough market on players in it, it's really not. And some Boston's a tough one. Philly's the sort of famously tough one. Players will tell you that. But people that I've known in the game over the years have said Toronto is as tough a media market on players, coaches, managers, maybe as there is in the game. That might not be a great fit for him under all these ancillary circumstances.
Interesting. All right, so where do the Cubs turn from here? Someone, as I spoke to before I knew I was going to be with you, I said, so where do the Cubs turn from here? He said, look, they are going to spend, and they're going to spend big, but they are not going to trade Cade Horton, who they think can front their rotation over the next 2 seasons. They're not going to say, well, we got to get Tyler Glasnow. All right, take our number one pitching pro. He goes, that's not going to happen. They're not going to give up Matt Shaw, who they think's their long-term answer at third, and go, all right, take him. We just drafted him last June so we could sign Matt Chapman to a 5-year deal and then look and go, oh, another young guy that's starring for us. He said, I would look at maybe a deal where you give up good prospects. You take all the money of Tyler Glasnow and Isaac Paredes with the Tampa Bay Rays. He said that makes some sense. He said they'll do some other things. Maybe it's Rhys Hoskins. Maybe it's Cody Bellinger. But he said they're going to spend $240 million. They're going to be right at that luxury tax line. And then if they're in there in late July, yes, they would go into the tax. But he said, I do not believe they're going to push all their chips in and bankrupt their farm system. You agree with that?
I think that's a reasonable evaluation of the situation. But I also think, and we talked about this, look, if they're in on Otani, that's just money, as Theo would say, comparing trades to free agency. So once you figure out the calculus of whether you can afford the salary and the payroll, and especially with all the money coming in with an international marketed guy like that, that makes sense. Obviously, that makes sense. That bat that Otani represents is one of the 2 biggest things you need on this team. The other one's the starting pitcher. So if you got the money to go in, I think you should, if you're not going to spend the money on Otani because either you don't want to or he just chooses another place, but you budgeted that ceiling of money, there's players out there. Go get them. Go get those bats. You need another lefty bat in that lineup. Now, Soto's off the board now, going to the Yankees. Bellinger's probably not coming back. You're going to have to wait out that market probably anyway, at least for a little while. Maybe you bring him back. Maybe you get involved in that and bring him back. Maybe you do it in a couple of pieces, a couple of different hitters. Maybe Chapman's one of them. Jamer Candelario, maybe he's in play to bring him back. I know that Candelario's waiting on some of these Otani teams to find out whether any of those might pivot to him as part of an answer to not getting Otani, and then maybe offer more than some of the smaller market teams that are now in and want to get something done with Candelario. So there's all these balls in the air, and the Cubs are a team that they have as much or more avenues to aggressively pursue as any team has in terms of just choices, because they do have a strong farm system and they do have a lot of money. I would say you push in on this hard. Go ahead and I like the idea of getting Glasnow, maybe Paredes. I like that idea. That's a nice short-term fix that you can afford. He looks like his health is on the upswing. He never made 30 starts, but if you could get 25 at the quality that this guy represents, that's pretty damn good. And you got some other depth in frontline guys. But you need the bats. You need the bats. And if they can come with a glove like Chapman, then maybe that's a way to go too. Again, you have the resources. You can do it without breaking the bank. You can do it without breaking your farm system. I'll tell you, you want to hear, I'll give you at least one liner from Boris, who has Chapman and Bellinger and Soto, by the way. He's talking about Chapman. He was talking about how rare that commodity is. Like, all his clients are a rare commodity, right? But
yeah,
the rare commodity, always. And, Chapman's got the platinum glove defense at third base, right? And he's got power. So he says, that elite glove that gives you, almost guarantees you 4+ WAR a year just because of the glove. And he's got the power. It's so scarce that it has owners in baseball upset that it's so scarce. He says they're chapped, man. Then anyway, cue the eye roll there.
Wow. Okay.
Let me give you a better one on Bellinger. He asked about Bellinger's market and how many teams are in on it. He says when it comes all the great things Bellinger does, he says when it comes to Bellinger, the belly button's being pushed, and there's more inners than outers.
Yeah, he said that. I heard that one. This guy's unbelievable. And he said the Cubs got the benefits of a full belly.
That was at the GM meeting. He had a new one for the winter meetings.
So I'm looking at Chapman's numbers. He's a plus defender. He's 30 years old, and he will turn 31 in April. He hit 240, 17 home runs. He was a 4.4 WAR player last year. Pretty good. Pretty good. He's not a huge power guy. Maybe he'll be better at Wrigley than he is in Toronto. Maybe. But if Matt Shaw is a year away, how many years do you sign Matt Chapman to?
It depends on what you're doing with your DH too, because you bring the other kid up and you can rotate guys and do things like that. Chapman's obviously an elite guy, so in the field, so you're going to want him there as often as you can. But I don't know. He's going to command at least 5, right?
I would think so. That would surprise me if the Cubs went down that road.
What if you gave him what he wanted in an opt-out after a couple of years? What if you gave him what he wanted and then some with no trade clause? And, you can probably find a way to get creative. Again, if you're in on Otani and that's serious, you've got the financial resources to pivot at any level you want.
Correct. So
now it's different than some of these other years that we've talked about, even when they were at the luxury tax threshold or spending that amount of money annually. This is a lot different than any of those previous years.
What about the Cubs on Josh Hader? Any word there at all?
I haven't heard anything on that, although just to be fair, this has been a really slow-moving winter meetings, even historically, because of the guys at the top and the very top being Otani, but also Yamamoto, the pitcher from Japan, who's being posted, and they say he could be a $300 million guy. So you got You got a record-setting guy probably on the market this year, probably nothing. I mean, for sure, a record-setting guy. Then you got another guy that's going to be up among the all-time contracts. And then you got a guy like Soto that's in a process as we speak now of getting traded to the Yankees. And then they're not trading without thinking they're going to extend him. So that's going to be another Aaron Judge deal there, plus probably.
So do you think, like I do, like I said on the radio today, and I'll say it right here, if I wake up on February 15th, 14th, whenever it is they report to Mesa, Arizona, and Miles Mastroboni and Nick Madrigal are my third baseman and Drew Smiley's my fifth starter, I will flip my shit. I will go scorched earth on them because you can't tell me that your biggest offseason acquisition is Craig Counsell. But I don't believe that will be the case. Do you?
If that's the case, you have every right in the world to do it. And you'll probably be leading an army of people doing it because you're 1,000% right on that. So I don't believe it'll happen either. I just don't believe that because there's money out there. Now, I will say this, with some of the stuff going on with the Bally Sports Network and the 14 teams that were under contract with them for media rights, the bankruptcy of their parent company is affecting a lot of teams. The Minnesota Twins don't have a TV deal for next year. Cleveland and Seattle have both slashed payroll, cut payroll to some degree because they don't know what's coming next. And Bally has said they're pulling the plug on everybody after 2024. So even going into the offseason, some of the money that looked like it was out there and some of the teams that looked like they were going to be in to try to compete might have declined some. So that puts the Cubs in an even more advantageous position than we thought they might be in. And again, if they don't get Otani because he chooses to go somewhere else or they get outbid by the Dodgers, then that leaves them the ability to almost literally do whatever they want. So more than ever, if they fall short of something significant and that looks competitive, they don't have to win the offseason, but it's got to look real enough to please you, their biggest fan, then they have a right to be shredded over it.
100,000%. All right, Gordon, have a wonderful trip back to Chicago. It's been quiet for the Cubs, quiet for the White Sox. Chicago baseball's got a lot of maneuvering to do the rest of the winter, right?
Oh, man, there's a ton to come. This might go all the way up to spring training.
Last thing, make a prediction. Where does Otani go? Where does Yamamoto go?
Otani to the Dodgers, unless he's stupid. Because I don't think it would be smart for him to pick the Blue Jays if it's those two teams. And where does who go?
Yoshinobu Yamamoto.
Ooh. If the Dodgers don't get Otani, he goes there. Otherwise, I'd keep my eye on New York. Maybe the Mets.
Wow.
Keep an eye on the Mets. I mean, look at all the money they took off their books in those trades. Well, they picked up a lot of that money. But remember last year they signed they had Verlander and Scherzer on the books for $86 million combined in last year's salary alone, last season's salary alone. And then they traded those guys. But Steve Cohen's not going away, man. He's not going to just suddenly go to a tank rebuild here. He's Yamamoto at 25 years old might be the way he pivots off of getting rid of some older players and salaries.
Gordon, travel safely, man. We'll see what happens if Shohei or Yoshinobu Yamamoto decide they want to come to Chicago. Just put him in your luxury vehicle and let's go.
Yeah, my luxury vehicle. You should see my luxury vehicle. Yeah. I have one more prediction, Cap. I predict within 10 days we'll have an emergency podcast.
Really?
They have so much to do. I think some of the logjam clears up when Otani makes his decision, and the Cubs will be among the first teams, to do something at that point. When I said it could go all the way to spring training, that could be to finish the job. I think we'll have an emergency podcast within 10 days.
All right, bring me Josh Hader, Tyler Glasnow, and Isaac Paredes, and I'll be happy.
I'll see what I can do.
All right. Have a great trip, man. Tell all your fan club back there that are all watching. We said hi.
All right.
All right, we'll
I'll
see you.
see you, Cap. Have a good one.
Take care. There he is. That's our guy. That's Gordon Wittenmeyer on the scene at the baseball winter meetings in Nashville, Tennessee. Another edition in the books of the Cubs Recap Podcast. Don't forget, as Gordon said, emergency podcast anytime the Cubs make a big move. Have a great rest of your day. We appreciate you subscribing and listening and watching. Take that.